really try to stay out of the conventional wisdom chatter. It's okay to have one or two social media channels, solve the problem. And our problem is removing the stress of writing a book. So what? We're using AI to find gaps, to find mistakes, to find repetitive terms, to remove stutters. I would not take capital. I would grind it out. I think that let's take VC money. I think it's for moonshots, as it said. And I think everyone has to know that.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Long Game. My guest today is Dan Curran, who is the CEO and founder of Chapters. Chapters is a platform to write a book far faster than using a ghostwriter or any other platform using, guess what, AI. Now, it's not what you think. There is a lot of human process involved in this. So there's an editor, you work with your editor, but it's shifting the approach from just having natural conversations with your editor and then using AI on the back end to help identify gaps in your stories, identify grammatical errors, and kind of work with you to build the initial draft. In this conversation with Dan, we cover what it's like to build a company in this AI world, specifically from the back office perspective, his thoughts on venture capital and why you don't necessarily need it, or at least you should be far more aware when taking it on, and what the nature of publishing and content is going to be as we evolve over time in this new world order of AI. I learned a lot about this sector, this space, this idea from this conversation. I hope you enjoy it. If you have any feedback, shoot me a message, and I hope you enjoy. So what made you say, let me build a publishing company in this world where AI is in some ways kind of making publishing, writing way more prevalent, way more common? So what was it about AI plus publishing that just kind of drew you to this opportunity?
Well, as a consumer from the outside, we've all noticed music, Spotify changes there. We've noticed print media, all the changes there, mostly not good changes. I come from a marketing background. So I think ever since social media really came about, it's always been in this flux constantly and very contextually relevant to the industry. It's just chaos, so to speak. So when ChatGPT launched in November of 2022, it was like, great, more chaos and more disruption. And I had my eye on the book publishing space. I believe wholeheartedly.
Why specifically that? Like, why were you looking at that sector?
I was on a couple of boards of people who'd written books, and tangentially was, new enough to hurt myself. And I had just not seen a lot of changes, except with Amazon and audiobooks and ebooks. But in the last decade, there's a lot of gatekeepers. And I'm careful when I say it because I don't want to be complaining or bitching or like these are bad people. They're all wicked smart. They're all amazing. It's just time stopped ghostwriters, traditional publishing, pitch decks to get your book, having an agent. It has not changed. It has not changed. And so that is more the ecosystem, those types of ecosystem, I gravitate towards. And you go in it very humble. You're like, I'm just trying to solve a problem. And the problem that we're solving is that most people are intimidated to share their wisdom. So not talking about it's going to sell a ton of books, just why is it not more democratic where you can just capture your wisdom? So that's what we're doing at Chapters. So Chapters, the name, it's obviously chapters of a book, but it's really chapters of your life is kind of, where we're coming. So we want to democratize it and really remove that stress of writing a book. So that's how it started. And so we're excited on where it's going.
I have a few chapters of my life. Pitch me, right? So I maybe have some stories to tell or something I want to write about. Why Chapters versus the traditional approach? And then also just kind of talk me through the process.
Well, contextually, I would like when you say why Chapters, I would say, well, why 23andMe? Why would you grab your DNA and spit in a tube, and because you want to know kind of where did this all begin, and so it's kind of that visceral, reasoning that I have on why chapters, why you should just capture who you are in your life and as you evolve, and we all evolve, and share your wisdom and your genius and your mistakes and all that. So very, very just primal aspirations there. Why chapters is that there's a fact that I don't know about you, but the smartest people I know have never written a book. My uncle, my neighbor, my mentors. And generally, it's one of a couple of reasons. They don't have the fine motor skills. They're ADD. They're busy building their companies. They're busy, in a blue collar job doing whatever they're doing, but they're very, very wise people. And we thought, why not use AI to capture those text, that voice, capture the voice, turn that into text, and organize it, and ask questions, and make suggestions. And really, the last thing we even considered, or really not consider, is to use it to replace that person's wisdom or life experiences. You can't, right? So there's really no plagiarism. We're just making it easier to capture, their perspective. So the process in and of itself, the most complicated part is really this conversation. It's really a series of conversations with an editor. We
a human editor?
A human editor. Yeah, and I do have to say that. You do, because so it is true that people do ask, is this a bot that I'm going to be speaking to? No, I would say that's really the magic. I can quantify it. I can just see it all the time, that the magic is really allowing a best-selling editor, someone who's really got best-selling books under their belt. They're kind of alphas themselves. A lot of our clients are alphas, so they're thought leaders, scientists, etc. So they get to come in, the client, the author, on a weekly basis over 3 or 4 months, and just.
And sorry, I got to ask: is alpha like an industry term, or?
No. I meant like they're just an alpha personality.
Okay.
So if our client,
top class kind of.
Yeah, they're just if you're a CEO of a company or a doc, we have a couple of scientists. I mean, these people are not usually asked to be vulnerable, to be transparent. It's not like we're, so you have to have someone that has stature on the Zoom call, so to speak. So we had, and part of their stature is just their background. So they have these weekly conversations, and then the kind of the witchcraft, the science behind it, the sausage making that we do with the large language model is just organizing that content. And as they move through the process, especially at the beginning, it's really accelerated. Everything's accelerated. When we talk for an hour or so, we're going to have 10,000 words here. So you can imagine over, 2 or 3 months, it's more subtraction than addition. So it's aggregating all the text. And what's also beautiful is that if they have any existing thought leadership, blogs, maybe they have a partial manuscript, we throw that into the large language model. So organizing it. And then the special sauce is really that editor that's able to be a true, what's in the industry called the developmental editor. They're not so much thinking about grammar. They're thinking about the story arc. Is this chronological? Is it a parable? Just really taking a deep breath and getting to know the author. So the editors love it more than working with the ghostwriter, our editors, or even working with the author, because it comes quick. They have more to edit. So the process is allowing the editor to, do their job.
I think that's interesting too, that by doing storytelling, right? So you have your editors sit down with the author and you just have conversations, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but you sit down and just have a conversation, you tell stories, and then magic happens, and then that gets refined into a manuscript. And so it's not really, it's taking something that's already so natural for the author to do, to talk about themselves, their life, their experience, etc. And then the sausage making, it's not necessarily it's this complete AI automated, you talk to a robot, you talk to an AI, and then out pops a book. You're kind of blending in, okay, well, let's reimagine publishing. What could this look like if we built a better model? Oh, there are also some tools and technology that we can use, such as AI, transcription, et cetera, to enhance that process. But it sounds like it's still very human-led from beginning to end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's human led more on the author side. So yeah, the editor is still there. The editor is kind of working with the AI as a co-pilot because the AI will generate questions every week, what we call a gap analysis. So I don't know, maybe the story you went in and hugged your grandmother, and the editor might have let that go, like, great, you went, but AI might catch it, and I'm just making this up. Well, how did you feel when you had, what was in the room, what day, what time of the year was it, those kind of things. So they're both working in tandem to kind of triangulate anything that might be missing in this story. So it's kind of a village helping. And as far as kind of coming up with content that's not the author's voice, it will make suggestions. Like it'll say, would you rather say it like this? But they have to physically do that. And is that any different? I think it's a lot more ethical than a ghostwriter just writing stuff out of their words, than. So we're trying to do everything we can to make it, the editorial integrity and attribution and all that is top notch as we can. But at the end of the day, our main goal is for the author just to share their wisdom, and there's no need to make up any words. They have the words. We're really just, fixing grammar, with the AI as far as any type of, manipulation of the content. We're, first person, second person. We all talk. We might, in one chapter, if they're talking first person, second person, third, we can automatically with AI correct that. So it's these subtle along the edge type fixes that are happening, but it's authenticity is really important.
Do you get any pushback on people saying, oh, well, AI is, an AI engine, it's just going to be kind of garbage in, garbage out. It's not going to be as good. The quality is going to be worse. What's kind of your response to that? Or is it not an issue? Or a concern,
I would
I
say
not
there's an issue with AI, but not that one. As far as people's perception, it's the garbage in or garbage. It's their story. So most of our clients have they have plenty to say.
Hopefully they
so
know
we're
some
not
things that are useful.
Yeah. So there's not we're, like I said, this call will be 10,000 words. So by 12, 13 weeks, we have a lot of content, so we're not short on content. I would say the conversations and once the client works in the editor, it's all their words. So it's all exciting and just again, it's a village that's moving the manuscript down the path. I will say the issue on AI, which we knew at the very beginning and totally understand, is just that ChatGPT was launched without a user manual. And so It was a test. So it just went, I'm in St. Louis, what's his name, the founder, president is from here. And so I've heard him speak a couple of times. It was just a test. So there's no user manual. So since then, everyone has got their own prejudices, and there's, these AI experts, and we all hear that every day. And so we have to fight that a little bit, saying, no, this is just organizing. I guess otter is a good, and I don't use that as an analogy, or fireflies. It's the same concept. It's just we've trained it to do a book. And the big thing, I think even bigger that we're heading towards is, this manuscript doesn't just live on Word or a Google Doc. It lives in a large language model, for lack of a better term, but it lives in a vessel. So that vessel will live in perpetuity. So that author will have a chance to start its second book. And it will already have learned that author's tone and style. If you want to atomize it to create social media content, it can pull from that. So it's really a fountain that is really, really exciting. And I think, we nail it and our growth goes as fast as it's going, then, we're going to see kind of a reimagination of what a modern author looks like and acts like. It's just much, it's their IP, and we're capturing their IP to, hopefully find more, media or more income streams eventually. So
I think two things to pull on that you mentioned. One is just the term chaos, right? There's chaos everywhere. I know you're working on a book, particularly leaning into that concept. And then also you mentioned how there's no user manual for ChatGPT, for Gen AI in general. It's this brand new tool, extremely powerful. You can do so much with it. And yet everyone's kind of trying to figure out what that process is. So how have you, like, what have you learned in going through building chapters, in training your LLM, and kind of going on this AI journey? Like, what are the big takeaways? What are failures in that journey, in that process? And is there any kind of, oh, this makes sense, this is something I wish I'd known from the beginning that I could pass on, that's very useful from building AI applications for production use cases?
Well, no different than other companies I've built and run, you are constantly making mistakes. You're constantly learning. And so, that's kind of just your entrepreneurial DNA. Do you have the stomach to and patience to know that there's a high likelihood you're going down the wrong path? Do you have the experience and to know that you're going to you don't want to overinvest, and I have a partner, and he's more on the technology side than I am, and I've had a couple of partners before, and I've just, whether it's my partner or other staff, you just really, really have to be patient during this whole process. Also knowing that we have to move fast. And I know that sounds, talking on both sides of my mouth, but there is a recipe there that,
like a true entrepreneur.
Yeah, like a true entrepreneur. So, the lessons are, here's a good one. You talk about money and investing. I did a SaaS software at the worst time in the world in 2016, 17, 18, with millions of dollars of VC money and my money. And, we do not need all that team staff anymore. That is just not a reality anymore. So you can accomplish quite a bit with such a lean team. And we are, we're a team of four, and maybe we have a team of 20 or 30, disparate, near shore, offshore, and so forth, and growing. But, my business model would have had that team at 100 people, 10 years ago. So I think there's just a lot of excitement. And as far as, my advice, you didn't frame it that way, but it's just ferocious reading and following the right people, people that you feel that are not too high, too low about the space, and kind of cerebral about it. I think Ethan Malik and a couple other people that are out there, they just seem to be a little bit more wise than your average person. So, and then the customer, what is, we're like everyone else, you're looking for the X factor. So we have authors that are generally high net worth or really accomplished people. Even so, they're amped to write a book. You're being very vulnerable and transparent. It's like buying a house, or I don't know what would be another. It's like a big decision, right? And so you're not, by the time they get to our doorstep, most of our leads come from other publishers that the author's stuck or, doesn't want to work with a ghostwriter. They're just focused on the experience of work, of getting this book done. And writing a book, we have to make it, just amazing. It just has to be like, maybe another term is frictionless, and we all strive for that. But when you're working with individuals, which is very different, for a decade or more, I worked with companies and big marketing departments, and it has its own kind of way of operating. This is an individual who's paying a lot of money, and you certainly want to, they don't care about large language models. They don't care about a lot of this stuff. They just want to get through the process. So we have, I'll just say this last thing, we have the AI and the training, and then you have kind of old fashioned workflow, right? Just workflow, getting through that. And so they're both kind of two tech paths we're going down. They connect, they don't connect at times, but you kind of have to watch both of them. So one is very voyeuristic on the AI and very nuanced, matching tone, all that kind of stuff. Making sure it's the author's words, all this training that we do. And then the workflow, he's got it for the editor and everyone. It's just good old fashioned, file management. So it's just like any other companies. It's a lot going on, and but it's like a restaurant, right? The kitchen's really a madhouse, but the front of the house is peaceful.
I'd imagine one of the bigger technical problems you deal with is context, and how to make sure that the AI has awareness that what happens in chapter 1 may or may not be relevant in chapter 11, and not losing all that because they have finite memories. So is that something you've bumped into? How are you guys addressing that?
Yes, with some assumption. It's a great question. Early on, we saw that, but we don't have that issue at all. One is just we've got better at training, and also there is input and work of the author and the editor. So this is still very human related. So we've handled that in a second and third way as well, aside from the training. One is we try to front load the outline, the tone of the book, the target persona at the very beginning.
You like map out the full structure, the
map
plan, the
out
instructions.
big time. No, we didn't do that early on. So so everyone is like, yeah, this is 80% great, and 20% this is crap. And and a lot of times it's crap because they see in the I don't really want to talk about that partnership, or that, I don't want to talk, maybe there's some IP from the company I worked for before and I can't address that. So it's just level sets everything. And then as they go through, I'll quantify it a little bit. And these numbers sometimes are different on where you get your information, but to sit down and write a book is generally a couple of 100 hours. That's you going in the woods, typing your notepad and just, writing a book. And it's about half of that with a ghostwriter, as far as the author's concerned. So an author could be 90 to 100 hours with the ghostwriter, sometimes more, sometimes less. Ours is about 40 or 50 hours. So there's still a lot of human element. And what the future holds 2 years, 10 years from now, we'll see. We build it so we can evolve, but there's still this human element that's very important. So making sure we don't have the order wrong, going back to what you said, or duplicating content, et cetera, that's caught kind of half robot, half human, or catching that early on.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that from a writing perspective. I've built a few different AI applications, both myself and also teams that I'm involved with. And I guess I said AI applications, and I have built those, but what I mean more is using AI to build software or to help scaffold. Mm-hmm. And that design pattern of really beginning with the end in mind, focusing on the outline, making sure the requirements and the instructions are really detailed. It's a bit more boring, right? It's kind of far more fun as a builder to say, oh, well, I kind of know where I'm going. Let me just get started. Let me build the first feature. Let me build another feature. Let me think about this. But same thing with storytelling. Oh, let me just tell you a story, and then, oh, well, there's also this other story. But if you really do take the time to give clear instruction to an AI, it's far more effective at being able to say, okay, well, I have this big context, right? I know what the objective is. I know where we're going. I know what the broad brushstrokes are. Well, now, okay, let's get some more context and color for chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3. And same thing with building software with AI as a companion partner. It's the same type of structure where that is way more effective if you take the time, you really invest in building out that clear framework, the instructions, the guidelines ahead of time, and then you start kind of doing second passes, third passes to fill in with more color, features, requirements, user experience, or in your case, stories, anecdotes. I'm not a writer, I don't know, but
yeah, it takes hundreds and hundreds. As of today, with the toolkit we all have right now, it takes hundreds and hundreds of hours to train just to get at a baseline. And someone gave us an analogy a long time ago. It's like telling your 12-year-old child to go down the street and buy a loaf of bread. Sounds simple enough, but that child has to open the door, close the door, or has to get dressed. It has to do 1,000 steps before it even gets back home. So it was many months of doing that. And then that was just baseline. Then it was like, okay, what if we're dealing with a scientist who we have now, PhD, who thinks in a very academic way? And there's no emotional pull. Well, the editor has to have their A game on, but we have to make sure that we're collecting all this information, but giving them some options on how to tell this story that they can live with, versus someone who has got like just a big idea, Simon Sinek type book. So there's a lot of monotony that goes into it, and that's just half of it. Then the other half is this living library. So once it's all done, how do you atomize that content and turn it into a lot more? And that's where I get really, really excited, because it's all about IP. It's all about, yeah, I'm excited about the manuscript, that we're democratizing it, that the snobs, like a better term, say, well, you need to do it old school. I'm like, well, you're preventing, I don't know, my dad died years ago. I don't have anything about him in his life. I would like to have this knowledge. So why not? We're not going to gatekeep anymore. That's old world. We're going to let this person have, and the market will take care of it. Sells one copy or a million. That's how that'll work. But as far as the people that really want to take that IP and say, hey, this idea could be a movie or a miniseries, or it could be a TEDx speech or whatever, that's where it'll be really exciting as well.
That's something I've thought a lot about with the world of AI. Is clearly we're moving towards a world where it's easier to generate content and quality content. And whether that's Sora from OpenAI and generating videos, which is very early stages. We've seen image generation, which is getting pretty good. And then obviously content generation or writing generation. It sounds like, ChatGPT, unless you train it to be more nuanced, which I'm sure you've spent a lot of time in training your models. What do you see as the future of content in general? I know that's like a really weird, broad question, but when it's much easier to capture your voice and to create content, fast forward 5-10 years, what does that look like long term? You mentioned maybe your idea can be turned into a movie. Maybe you can make the movie yourself using Sora in 5 or 10 years. But like, what do you see as the future of content creation in general?
I'm getting all the thought leaders and pontificators coming across my screen like you are. And like I said earlier, you try to pay attention to the really smart people. And quite frankly, the really smart people aren't really talking, what they're, about 5 or 10 years out. The one, and even hearing you say that, the ones I like are just fiddling and testing. And then they put out there, hey, I did this with that. And so I think will there be a Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible type movie that nothing is real? Yes, you asked me. I think that will, in my lifetime, I will watch a movie on Netflix that I'll really, really enjoy. And then that's big question. Is that art? That's when those kind of conversations, and, I don't know, the world's so crazy right now. Might as well throw this in, we'll talk about it, because it's, as far as the, society dealing with all this stuff, and people will pontificate and argue about it. So I don't have a really good answer, other than the velocity of change, and those, creepy videos that we saw a year ago, are not quite as creepy as they were a year ago, and so I think, I kind of, this isn't the best analogy. I look at, I started my career around when the graphic designers started using their tools. Drawing a blank, but graphic
Photoshop
design,
or
Photoshop and so forth. And there was a time where the artists with pens and sketch pads and so forth complained about that just for a few minutes. And then it seemed like everyone really forgot about that pretty darn quickly. So I don't know how what we're doing, or a lot of other people are doing, is much different than that intersection. And it seemed like it all worked out. There's plenty of art directors and people still working. So anyway, so that's my Pollyanna look at it. Just keep it positive. So
I've used the analogy. I don't know if it's a fair analogy, but I've used the analogy of, we used to have portrait painters, and then photography came, and it didn't kill that profession, but it made it far more niche and less profitable. But I think there is always this kind of fear of what happens next, because we can't see where the jobs go. And yet new tools of creation typically empower creators to create more. So maybe that's overly optimistic. Maybe that's, me putting on my tinfoil tech hat and just saying tech is always good. But
right.
It's interesting to see. Yeah, there is fear, there is pushback. We don't quite know exactly what that looks like, but I believe at least it's going to be net good.
Yeah, and I kind of the old entrepreneur lesson I've learned is, you really try to stay out of the conventional wisdom chatter. It's okay to have one or two social media channels, but don't have five, and don't, over index in your time listening to all this. Solve the problem. And our problem is, removing the stress of writing a book. That's it. We talk about it all the time. So that's what and if you have on the table authenticity, editorial rigor, non-negotiable, has to be their words. Well, great. We've also found that these authors who never thought they could write will participate more. They just need it a little bit more. So what? We're using AI to find gaps, to find mistakes, to find, repetitive terms, to remove stutters. What the hell's wrong with that? It seems pretty good. And we're throwing an editor in there. So when people complain about AI, I think that's more of you, me, our industry. My wife, my neighbors, they're busy, not thinking about all this. And I think really content that's synthetic, that's, and actually, I don't know the answer to this, but we see bad content now that AI writes all the time, right? It's easy to
see bad content that humans write also.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm gonna steal that. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. It all synthetic comes together. I don't know if it's garbage and doesn't resonate, doesn't add value, then you'll ignore it. But I would, for everyone, I'd get over that. And I don't have anything to do with that, but that train has left. And I think the Tom Cruise analogy train's left. I think it's, it's just, I've heard some songs recently from my little nephew, and I'm telling you, that was creepy. That was a really good song.
Was it your nephew's voice? Because I know that's a big thing that you can do as well, as you can.
Yeah, well, I see that. I haven't done it, and I've heard. I've seen the TikTok ad where people are blown away. But no, it wasn't. It was like some young country girl that doesn't exist, and it seemed like she didn't. Seemed like a pretty good. So I'm just trying to solve our space of the world, and I think if you keep authenticity and to some degree, and focus on integrity in what you're doing, everything takes care of itself.
I think that's pretty good advice too, just for entrepreneurship in general or life. But focus on solving a problem, which you said earlier as well. But focus on solving a real problem in front of you that helps someone, right? And then there will be more things, and there will be a future, and there will be future problems and other things to figure out. But right now, don't worry about trying to predict the future. You can't. Just solve a problem for someone right now.
Yeah. And 100%. And get your IQ up as far as UX, just good old fashioned UX, because that's, even as we talk, I'm thinking, where we spend most of our time, is that client happy? Is that CEO or that doctor who's very busy and giving us a couple of hours? Is there interaction and light touch of our technology? Is it just intuitive? So that existed 10 years ago, probably exists 10 years from now. It's just, as someone eloquently told me, it has to be stupid simple. So we just say, is it stupid simple for them?
I want to go back to something that you said earlier about you've built, you're a serial entrepreneur, you've built other companies, and doing what you are doing today would have been, I forget the exact number, but a 10x, on employee headcount that you need, or a much larger number. My question for you is, what does this look like? Maybe just speak to your own experience of how has building companies changed with AI? Not from the product that you're building, not from Chapters itself and the product for consumers, but in building and running a company and being able to do more with less, or do more with the same resources.
Well, I'll get over my skis a little bit, just with, obviously there's OpenAI and their playground, and what Amazon affords and what we can do. There's certain infrastructure, tech stack, elements that just make it easy to kind of accelerate, minimal viable product.
And actually, can you explain OpenAI Playground? Because I don't know how many people are actually familiar with it, the tools.
You would need my partner, because I can honestly say I've never opened up the back end of it. We just pay a little check every month. But it's just like anything, the limits that folks see with consumer facing on ChatGPT, word count and token count, and you can't throw in 100,000 word. Sometimes I hear that you can, but they've never seen it. There's just limitations to what we as consumers. It's more than enough than any of us need using ChatGPT, but on the back end, on the playground, it affords more enterprise level tools being built, and
You do
they're
more experiments far more easily from a
correct.
technical
Yeah,
perspective.
correct. And so it's still yes. So all of that is very different than when I had to go buy a bunch of hire a bunch of PHP developers. I had to hire a product manager. There's just many layers to really do a SaaS product well, thinking about UX, and I think just generally people are better at sharing information. It's just a lot of transparency out there, how to build an interface. And also keep in mind, there's a big difference between e-commerce, B2B, e-commerce, B2C. I mean, there's similarities, obviously, to some extent, but on the target persona, on their psychographic, how they interact with all this. So it's all very contextual. So it's not the direction I think you were anticipating for me to answer this question, but a lot of it is for us just to stick in our swim lane. Who do we know? I do not come from a big B2C background in marketing. I've been in marketing forever, but when I did that, it was more branding. It wasn't 100,000 user e-commerce site. So I have a low IQ in that space. That's not where I come from. So, I found a problem to solve and a market approach and a technology that, all of that in an area that I'm comfortable with. So knowing that keeps me very efficient, where when I've gotten out of that, you waste a ton of money and time. And I did that one time. I got in a swim lane that I probably shouldn't have been. And, you just spend a lot of extra money and heartburn.
I want to also explore, you mentioned marketing, you mentioned it earlier. You talked about how you're focused on helping people tell their stories, but then also alluded to some aspect of marketing and what goes into sharing in general. So what do you envision? Is this kind of future features? Is this just something you're thinking about? Talk more about the marketing side of things.
Marketing side regarding our company?
Yeah. I mean, what do you see as the approach to marketing changing based on having a living library and having more content and being able to do more with it over time?
So I came into marketing after the Mad Men era. And that Mad Men era, which I wasn't part of, I saw the TV show like everyone else, I guess, seemed very different than the one I came in. I came in social media, content marketing, user-generated content. I think that world is now Mad Men, and we're getting ready to go in a new world. And that's why I think it was time for me to tap out of marketing. It's so contextual to that industry, to the budgets, to the personality of the C-suite. Like, there's just so much that goes into it. So I think it's a great time if it's a small boutique marketing company, mid-size. I think these large holding companies I don't even know how they operate. And again, they're smart people. And I don't think it's their fault. I just think we're now in a new world with this. So you have IP, you write a book. We all know that now you can, that word I said before, atomize. We've known that for a while. You can take a book and turn it into multiple blogs and social media posts and so forth. That is just going to start and get easier and better. And you talk about video and be able to just do a text description and have your ad created instantly. That is a big change. I think Canva was kind of the canary in the coal mine. Not that it had really anything to do with AI, but it kind of was like, no, you can build a website and a beautiful birthday card and a book cover. You can do that yourself. I think now that's accelerated. So
so meaning with Canva as the example, do you mean it's just like lower barrier to entry, or what do you mean by Canva being
lower barrier to entry? They'll get better. They've gotten better at user experience. They know, they probably had a hypothesis that, hey, we can make this easier, but it's still you have to make it really easy, so we haven't gotten to really easy yet. but we'll get there where it's really, really easy, where you're just texting and you can do a movie. It's so that's the direction we're headed. So knowing that, as far as what do I see for us on marketing, it's kind of counterintuitive, I think, for some folks. We are more, we're anticipating that. We're gearing up to invest much more into our marketing. We know it'll be less people, but we are dependent more on partnerships. So we go to publishers, big, speaker bureaus, people that already have a lot of people that are leaning into writing a book. So again, the publishers have been our biggest old school publishers are sending us because that's where their supply chain is stuck. They've got a great person to write a book, but they can't get the person to finish the book. So they call on us. So our marketing is more kind of the B2B type marketing. But, I think, we're totally, just to be blunt, ignoring the social channels. I'll be really counter. I love LinkedIn. I think it's amazing for my Rolodex and for a lot of things. I think for us, our target's busy. They're not on LinkedIn, and no matter what data if you get anywhere above, a certain managerial level, these people are busy, and then they go home and they feed their dog and they are with their kids, and maybe they'll be on LinkedIn. So I even question that. I think there's actually a bit of, human interaction. That seems where we've had ours. But again, our swim lane is B2B, very targeted. But I guess I'm saying, who knows what the marketing mix will be a year from now. All of this attitude stands on a premise that I think the status quo is just really, really good at convincing us, because that's just how it's been. But when you go from Mad Men to kind of that user generated content, now we're going into a new era. Well, you're going to have a lot of people, again, to use the word heartburn, that are used to, pontificating about SEO tactics and media and so forth. And again, I don't think any of these people are dumb. They're all amazing people. It's just change is awesome and it sucks simultaneously.
the dual side of change and technology and growth, and it can be painful, but it's also good.
Yeah. So that constant iteration, experimentation is, not only did I do it with the SaaS company and iterate and sprints and all that, I think that nomenclature still goes with us to this new space, but it's maybe just even more fun, quite frankly. It's less downside as far as spending the money, you can test and fail quicker. So.
Closes out here. If you were to start a new B2B company today, not in 22, right? So right after ChatGPT, what have you gained in the past 2 years that you would start doing, implementing, building from day one? Differently, I guess, would be kind of implied in the question too.
Yeah. I'm going to be a politician, when the person asks them the question and they don't answer it all, they answer their own question. So I'm just going to tell you, somewhat related, but probably more like the politician. I would not take capital.
Why?
I would grind it out. I think that, let's take VC money. I think it's for moonshots, since it's said, and I think everyone has to know that. I think they've done a disservice to tens of thousands of young men and women who did not have a boss or manager, and had to and got a lot of cash, and they were never moonshots. And in a way, I don't blame VCs. I'm not saying victim for anyone, but there's just a lot of people out there that didn't, they went to college and they had 10 years of being a CEO, and if you have a lot of cash and then it fails, you're going to be very lonely. You're not the hot blonde at the end of the day, and the math on their end is 2 win and 8 lose. And it's just, and then sometimes you keep going down that rabbit hole to keep that business going. And I've seen
kind of dependency of going back,
dependency of it, and trying, and it's just better to kill that, stick a knife in it and move on, and move on. But then you have this constituency. And so maybe that's a better way of saying it, that be careful of the constituency you build around yourself, because it gets really complicated. It's like getting married and having a kid and 2 kids, life gets more complicated. And so just be careful about that. I'd also just stick with what you know, and it's all about the user, I see it all the time, that how's it go, that don't have a problem looking for a solution, or a solution looking for a problem. Like, really have a problem that needs to be solved, and don't
That
fall
you
in love
know.
with your solution. That you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you know.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I need to practice that in front of the mirror, because and if you don't have one, just wait. It'll find you. Trust me. If you're an entrepreneur, don't go looking to be an entrepreneur. It'll find you, and it'll keep you up at night because you're so excited. So that's what I've learned. Just stick to what you know, and be very vulnerable, and keep your constituency to a tight group. And right now, I'm jealous of anyone starting a company. I think it's a great time. And then my big mic drop advice is real estate. Seems like everyone I know that did well in real estate. That might have been the industry. No. I'm just saying that's well, you came from some background in that. That seems like a lot of people that have a lot of wealth right now made it in real estate. But that's a timing issue, but that has nothing to do with this conversation.
Dan, thank you so much. This is a phenomenal conversation.
Thank you so much.
If people want to connect with you or check out Chapters, write a book, where should they go?
Dan at chapters.io. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Dan Chapters. I'm sorry, on LinkedIn, Dan Curran, Curran, on LinkedIn. And love to talk to you. Love talking about AI, entrepreneurial world. And certainly, if you'd like to write a manuscript, I'd love to talk.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you check out this video right here. And if you really enjoyed it and you listened to the end, take 2 seconds and share the love so someone else might find it by clicking the thumbs up button and subscribing. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. But click that button.